The music stopped first. Across 17 different worlds, the alien species who had grown fond of human entertainment suddenly found their receivers picking up nothing but static. The catchy melodies that had become popular in the Outer Rim, colonies, the dramatic shows that even the most serious diplomats secretly enjoyed, and the constant chatter of human news broadcasts all vanished in the same moment. Commander Thale noticed it during his routine monitoring shift at the Proxima station. For 300 years, his people had tracked the electromagnetic noise coming from Earth's solar system. The humans were loud, constantly broadcasting everything from cooking shows to scientific data across the galaxy. Their transmissions had become as predictable as the rotation of planets, filling the cosmic airways with their endless energy. Now his screen showed only empty wavelengths where human signals should have been. Thale checked his equipment twice, then called his supervisor. Within an hour, monitoring stations across the galaxy were reporting the same thing. The Sol system had gone completely silent. No distress calls, no explanations, no gradual fade that might suggest technical problems. The humans had simply stopped talking to the universe. The news spread faster than light through the galactic communication networks. On the crystal worlds of the collective, harmonic frequencies carried whispers of concern. The reptilian hegemony's military commanders gathered in their war rooms, discussing what this might mean for their ongoing territorial disputes with humanity. The ancient ethereal council, beings of pure energy who rarely concerned themselves with physical matters, began to take notice. Dr. Vale was studying star charts in her laboratory when the alert came through. As the galaxy's leading expert on human behavior, she had spent decades analyzing their psychological patterns. Humans were social creatures, she knew, driven by an almost compulsive need to communicate. They shared everything from personal thoughts to scientific discoveries with whoever would listen. For them to suddenly stop broadcasting was like a star going dark. She immediately began reviewing her data. Human expansion had been rapid over the past century, and their colonies now stretched across 12 star systems, their trade routes connecting dozens of worlds. They had developed new technologies at an unprecedented rate, often surprising older civilizations with their innovations. Some species had grown nervous about humanity's quick growth, but there had been no recent conflict serious enough to cause such a drastic response. Captain Reed was 3 days out from Earth when he tried to make his routine check-in call. The merchant vessel Wanderer carried a cargo of rare minerals bound for the trading stations at Volf 359 Reed had made this run hundreds of times, always staying in contact with Earth's traffic control systems. The silence that greeted his transmission sent a chill through him. He tried different frequencies, emergency channels, even the old backup systems that most people had forgotten existed. Nothing. The entire Sol system might as well have vanished from the galaxy. Reed changed course immediately, pushing his ship's engines to their limits as he raced back toward Earth. What he found when he reached the outer edge of the solar system defied explanation. A barrier of pure energy surrounded the entire system, stretching from beyond Pluto's orbit to the asteroid belt. The barrier was invisible to the naked eye, but showed up clearly on sensors as a wall of controlled electromagnetic force. Reed's ship couldn't even get close to it. His instruments began malfunctioning at a distance of several million kilometers. He sent emergency broadcasts on all frequencies, describing what he had found. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Ships from every major species began heading toward the Sol system. The reptilian hegemony dispatched their fastest scout vessels. The crystalline collective sent their most advanced probe ships. Even the mysterious hive minds of the Outer Rim launched investigation fleets. Every probe that touched the barrier simply vanished. Not destroyed or disabled, but completely erased from existence as if they had never been built. The barrier showed no signs of damage or stress. It simply absorbed everything that came into contact with it and continued its silent vigil around humanity's home system. The galactic community was torn between theories. Some believed the humans had created the barrier themselves, perhaps as protection against some unknown threat. Others suggested it was evidence of humanity achieving a new level of technological advancement. The more paranoid species whispered about human weapons programs and secret experiments. The ethereal council remained silent on the matter, which only added to the mystery. As the oldest known civilization in the galaxy, they had seen countless species rise and fall. Their usual willingness to share ancient wisdom was replaced by an uncomfortable quiet that reminded many of the silence now surrounding Earth. Months passed with no change. The barrier remained intact, the Sol system stayed silent, and the galaxy slowly began to adapt to a universe without human chatter. Trade routes were adjusted to avoid the mysterious barrier. Entertainment networks filled the gaps left by human programming with content from other species. The constant background noise of human civilization gradually faded from galactic consciousness, but the scientists and military commanders never stopped watching. They established permanent monitoring stations around the barrier, recording every fluctuation in its energy patterns. They analyzed the electromagnetic signatures, searching for any clue about its origin or purpose. They prepared for the day when the barrier might fail, or the humans might emerge with explanations. Reed remained at Volf 359. His ship grounded while authorities questioned him about his last contact with Earth. He told them about his final conversation with traffic control, how normal everything had seemed. The controller had been friendly, asking about his cargo and wishing him safe travels. There had been no hint of impending crisis, no suggestion that within hours the entire human civilization would be cut off from the galaxy. As the first year of silence ended, some species began to celebrate quietly. The reptilian hegemony had always seen humanity as a threat to their dominance. With the humans gone, they could expand their territory without opposition. Smaller civilizations that had struggled to compete with human technology and trade began to prosper in the vacuum left behind. But the older species, those who had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, felt a growing unease. They had seen barriers like this before in the ancient histories that most preferred to forget. The energy patterns were familiar, reminiscent of weapons that had been used in wars so old that their details had been lost to time. The galaxy waited, watched, and slowly began to forget that Earth had ever been anything but silent. 2 years had passed since the silence began when Admiral Cross first noticed the crack. He was reviewing sensor data from the hegemony's monitoring station when a small anomaly caught his attention. The energy barrier around the Sol system showed a hairline fracture near Jupiter's orbit, barely visible even on their most sensitive equipment. Cross had been watching the barrier longer than any other military officer in the galaxy he had seen. It absorbed probe after probe without showing any signs of stress or damage. The barrier had seemed eternal, unbreakable, a perfect sphere of controlled energy that nothing could penetrate. This tiny crack was the first sign of change in over 700 standard days. He called his technical staff immediately. The crack was growing, spreading like a web across the barrier's surface. Within hours, fracture lines appeared throughout the energy field. The barrier wasn't collapsing slowly. It was being torn apart from the inside. Dr. Vale received the alert while reviewing her latest psychological profiles of human behavior. She had spent the past 2 years analyzing every piece of data about humanity's last known activities. Her conclusion was troubling. The humans had been preparing for something in the months before the silence. Their military production had increased. Their research projects had shifted toward defensive technologies, and their diplomatic communications had become more formal and distant. The barrier breach confirmed her worst fears. The humans hadn't created the barrier to protect themselves. They had been trapped inside it, and now they were breaking free. The first ship to emerge from the cracking barrier was unlike any human vessel anyone had ever seen. Where human ships had traditionally been sleek and elegant, this one was angular and predatory. Its hull showed modifications that seemed designed for one purpose: war. Weapon ports covered its surface, and its engines glowed with an intensity that suggested power systems far beyond anything humans had possessed before the silence. More ships followed, dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. The human fleet that emerged from the Sol system was massive, organized, and clearly built for combat. But these weren't the same ships that had been protecting human colonies 3 years ago. Every vessel showed signs of modification, upgrade, and redesign. The humans had been busy during their imprisonment. The lead ship opened communications on all galactic frequencies. The voice that spoke was human, but it carried a coldness that made even the reptilian commanders nervous. "This is Fleet Admiral Stone of the Terran War Machine. We have business to conclude." The message was broadcast in perfect galactic standard, but also in the native languages of every major species. The humans had learned to speak to their enemies in their own tongues. They had been listening, learning, and preparing while the galaxy thought they were gone. Admiral Cross ordered his fleet to maintain a safe distance while he reported to his superiors. The human ships weren't attacking, but they were establishing a perimeter around their solar system. Their weapons were powered, but not targeted. They were waiting for something. The next human broadcast came 6 hours later. Admiral Stone's voice was calm, professional, and absolutely terrifying in its certainty. "We know what you did. We remember every betrayal. Every species that participated in the conspiracy will answer for their crimes." The galactic community erupted in confusion. What conspiracy? What betrayal? The barrier around Earth had been assumed to be a human creation, perhaps a response to some unknown threat. But Stone's words suggested something far more sinister. Dr. Vale was among the first to understand. She had been studying the energy patterns of the barrier for 2 years, comparing them to historical records of ancient weapons. The signatures were familiar, but she had dismissed the similarity as coincidence. Now she realized her mistake. The barrier hadn't been created by humans. It had been created by someone else, using technology that predated most current civilizations. The humans had been prisoners, not isolationists. They had been trapped inside their own solar system for 3 years, and now they were free and looking for revenge. The Ethereal Council, who had remained silent since the barrier's appearance, finally spoke. Their holographic representative appeared in the Galactic Senate chamber, a being of pure energy that rarely bothered with physical interactions. "We must convene an emergency session. There are matters that require immediate discussion." The Council's admission sent shockwaves through the galactic community. As the oldest known civilization, they were guardians of ancient knowledge and historical records. If they were calling for emergency discussions, the situation was more serious than anyone had imagined. Captain Reed watched the developments from his stranded position at Volf 359. His ship had been converted into a temporary communications relay as various species tried to establish contact with the human fleet. The humans were responding to diplomatic overtures, but their messages were cold and formal. They were not interested in negotiation. The first detailed human broadcast came 72 hours after the barrier's collapse. Admiral Stone appeared. On screens throughout the galaxy, standing in what appeared to be a command center filled with tactical displays and star charts. "For 3 years, we have been trapped inside an energy prison designed to kill us slowly. Our sun was being manipulated to collapse into a black hole. Our worlds were cooling as the stellar manipulation drained our star's energy. We survived through desperation, innovation, and the knowledge that we had been betrayed by species we once considered allies." The image shifted to show technical readouts and energy signatures. The data was complex, but the conclusion was clear. The barrier had been a weapon, designed to compress Earth's sun and destroy the entire human civilization, while making it appear to be a natural stellar collapse. "We have spent 3 years preparing for this moment. We have studied our enemies, analyzed their weaknesses, and developed weapons specifically designed to counter their advantages. We have become what we needed to become to survive." Stone's image was replaced by tactical displays showing the positions of human fleets throughout the galaxy. The humans had not spent their imprisonment idle. They had been building, planning, and preparing for war. The species responsible for our imprisonment have been identified. The reptilian hegemony provided the raw materials for the barrier. The crystalline collective supplied the harmonic frequencies needed to control the energy flow. The hive minds calculated the precise positioning required for stellar manipulation, and the ethereal council wove it all together with their mastery of spacetime. The accusations hit the galactic community like a physical blow. The four most powerful species in the galaxy had apparently conspired to commit genocide against humanity. The evidence was compelling, detailed, and impossible to deny. We did not choose this war, but we will finish it. Each species that participated in the conspiracy will face justice. The galaxy will remember what happens when civilizations choose fear over coexistence. The human fleet began to move, dividing into separate battle groups. Each group took a heading toward a different region of the galaxy, toward the homeworlds of the species that had imprisoned them. The war was about to begin, and the galaxy was about to learn what humans could become when they were pushed too far. The Ethereal Council's archives had been sealed for over 2 centuries, hidden in pocket dimensions that existed between the folds of spacetime. Now, as human fleets moved toward their targets, the Council faced a choice that would determine the fate of the galaxy. They could maintain their silence and let the humans discover the truth through conquest, or they could reveal the full extent of their crime and hope for mercy. Elder Voss was the oldest member of the Council, a being of pure energy who had existed since before most current civilizations had developed space travel. He had witnessed the rise and fall of countless species, had seen empires bloom and wither across the stars. But he had never seen anything like what humanity had become during their imprisonment. The human tactical displays showed a level of planning that defied belief. They had spent 3 years trapped inside their solar system, slowly dying as their star was manipulated toward collapse. Instead of despairing, they had analyzed every piece of data they could gather about the galaxy. Outside their prison, they had identified the conspirators, studied their weaknesses, and developed weapons specifically designed to exploit those weaknesses. Voss accessed the sealed archives with reluctance. The records painted a picture of calculated genocide disguised as protection. The conspiracy had begun 50 years before the barrier's construction, when humanity's rapid expansion had begun to concern the established galactic powers. Humanity's growth had been unprecedented. In less than 2 centuries, they had gone from a single-world species to a galactic power with colonies across multiple star systems. Their technology advanced at a rate that made older civilizations nervous. Their diplomats were skilled, their traders were successful, and their military was growing stronger every year. The first secret meetings had been held in the Ethereal Council's dimensional chambers. Representatives from the 4 most powerful species had gathered to discuss the human problem. The reptilian hegemony saw humanity as a threat to their territorial ambitions. The crystalline collective worried about human technological advancement, disrupting their carefully maintained harmonic balance. The hive minds calculated that human expansion would eventually lead to resource conflicts that could destabilize the entire galaxy. The Ethereal Council had provided the final argument. Humanity's rapid development suggested they might eventually achieve the same level of energy manipulation that the Council possessed. If that happened, the current galactic order would be threatened. The 4 species had agreed that humanity needed to be stopped before they became too powerful to control. The original plan had been more direct: military action, economic sanctions, or diplomatic isolation. But humanity's growing alliances with neutral species made such approaches risky. The humans had proven skilled at turning conflicts into opportunities, using opposition to strengthen their position and gain sympathy from other civilizations. Dr. Vale had been right in her analysis. The humans had been preparing for something in the months before the silence, but they hadn't been preparing for war. They had been preparing for survival. Human intelligence networks had detected the conspiracy, though they hadn't understood its full scope. They had known something was coming, but they had underestimated the scale of the betrayal. The barrier construction had taken 5 years. The crystalline collective had provided the harmonic frequencies needed to control massive amounts of energy. The hive minds had calculated the precise positioning required for stellar manipulation. The reptilian hegemony had supplied rare materials from their mining operations in the galactic core, and the ethereal council had woven it all together with their mastery of space-time. Creating a prison that was meant to compress Earth's sun into a black hole, the plan had been elegant in its cruelty. Earth's sun would collapse slowly over the course of several years. The human colonies would have time to evacuate, but Earth itself would be destroyed. The galaxy would mourn the loss of humanity's homeworld, but the threat of human expansion would be eliminated. The surviving humans would be scattered across the galaxy, too few and too weak to pose a threat to the established order, but the conspirators had underestimated human ingenuity. When the barrier appeared, human scientists had immediately begun analyzing its properties. They had detected the stellar manipulation within hours of the barrier's activation. They had understood that they were under attack, and they had responded with typical human determination. The humans had stabilized their sun using technology that shouldn't have been possible. They had created artificial gravity generators to compensate for the stellar manipulation. They had developed closed-loop ecosystems to survive in their shrinking prison, and they had begun planning their revenge. Captain Reed was among the first to learn the full truth when the Council's archives were released to the galactic community. The data was overwhelming, containing detailed communications between the conspirators, technical specifications for the barrier, and projections for humanity's destruction. The evidence was undeniable. The humans had been betrayed by species they had considered allies. The reptilian hegemony had been trading partners with several human colonies. The crystalline collective had shared scientific data with human researchers. The hive minds had been neutral in most galactic conflicts, often siding with human positions. And the Ethereal Council had been mentors to human diplomats, teaching them about galactic politics and ancient history. The betrayal went deeper than genocide. It was a violation of trust that had been built over centuries of interaction. The humans had believed they were part of a galactic community, working together toward mutual prosperity and understanding. Instead, they had been marked for elimination by the very species they had tried to befriend. The first human retaliation came without warning. The reptilian hegemony's monitoring station at Vega simply vanished, along with its crew of 200. No debris, no distress signals, no trace that it had ever existed. The human fleet responsible for the attack left behind only a single message: the hegemony will answer for their crimes. Similar attacks followed across the galaxy. Crystalline collective research stations were destroyed by weapons that shattered their crystalline structures from within. Hive mind colonies went silent, as their collective consciousness was disrupted by targeted psionic attacks. The Ethereal Council's dimensional chambers were breached by forces that shouldn't have been able to exist in normal space-time. The humans weren't just attacking military targets. They were systematically dismantling the infrastructure that had made the conspiracy possible. Mining operations that had supplied materials for the barrier were destroyed. Research facilities that had developed the stellar manipulation technology were eliminated. Communication networks that had coordinated the conspiracy were severed. Dr. Vale watched the attacks with growing horror. The humans weren't trying to conquer the galaxy. They were trying to erase the species that had betrayed them. Every attack was precisely calculated to cause maximum damage while minimizing collateral casualties to neutral species. The humans were conducting a campaign of extinction, not conquest. The galactic community began to fracture as the truth spread. Neutral species demanded answers from the conspirators. Some civilizations offered to help the humans in their campaign of revenge. Others called for immediate surrender to prevent further destruction. The unity that had been built over centuries of cooperation collapsed in a matter of days. The reptilian hegemony was the first to attempt a direct confrontation. Their battle fleet, the largest in the galaxy, moved to intercept the human forces. Approaching their homeworld, the battle was over in minutes. The hegemony's ships were destroyed so completely that no wreckage remained. The human fleet continued toward its target without slowing down. Admiral, Stone's final broadcast before the assault on the conspirators' homeworlds was brief and absolute. We did not choose this war. We did not choose to become what we have become. But we will not allow the galaxy to forget what happens when civilizations choose fear over understanding, extinction over coexistence. The species that betrayed us will be removed from existence. Their fate will serve as a warning to all who would consider similar actions. The war had begun in earnest, and the galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their weapons, but their ability to remember every betrayal and ensure that it never happened again. The destruction of Harmony, the crystalline collective's homeworld, took exactly 18 minutes. The human fleet approached the planet's orbital defenses with a precision that suggested they had been planning this attack for years. They had studied every aspect of crystalline technology, analyzed every weakness in their defensive systems, and developed weapons specifically designed to exploit those flaws. The crystalline beings had built their civilization around harmonic frequencies, using sound and vibration to power their technology and coordinate their society. Their cities were massive crystal structures that resonated with carefully tuned frequencies, creating a planet-wide symphony of energy and communication. It was beautiful, elegant, and completely vulnerable to the weapons the humans had developed. The first wave of human attacks wasn't kinetic. They were sonic, broadcasting precisely calculated frequencies that caused the crystalline structures to vibrate beyond their tolerance levels. The planet's cities began to crack their harmonic networks, failing as the resonance patterns turned destructive. The crystalline collective's attempts to counter the attack only made it worse. As their own defensive frequencies amplified the human weapons, General Hayes commanded the assault from the flagship Retribution. She had been a junior officer when the barrier appeared, trapped inside the Sol system with the rest of humanity. She had spent 3 years studying the collective's technology, learning their weaknesses, and developing the weapons that were now tearing their homeworld apart. The crystalline beings tried to evacuate their population, but the humans had anticipated this. Human ships intercepted the evacuation vessels not to destroy them but to capture them. The collective's leaders were taken alive, transported to human vessels where they would witness the complete destruction of their civilization. The second phase of the attack targeted the planet's core. The collective had hollowed out portions of their world to create massive resonance chambers that amplified their harmonic abilities. The humans turned these chambers into weapons, using them to generate frequencies that shattered the planet's geological structure. Harmony literally fell apart, its crystalline surface cracking into fragments that drifted away into space. The hive minds of the outer rim faced a different kind of destruction. Their strength came from their collective consciousness, millions of individual minds linked together into a single, overwhelming intelligence. They had used this ability to calculate the precise positioning needed for the stellar manipulation that nearly destroyed Earth's sun. Commander Torres led the assault on the hive colonies with a fleet equipped with psionic warfare systems. The humans had spent their imprisonment developing technology that could disrupt collective consciousness, breaking the mental links that held the hive minds together. The weapons were based on human psychology, designed to exploit the individualistic nature that the hive minds had abandoned. The attack began with broadcasts that carried carefully crafted mental patterns. The signals were designed to awaken individual consciousness within the collective, forcing each hive member to remember their separate identity. The effect was devastating. The unified intelligence that had controlled billions of beings began to fragment, splitting into millions of confused, frightened individuals. The hive colonies descended into chaos as their collective decision-making systems collapsed. Ships crashed as their crews forgot how to coordinate. Cities went dark as the collective consciousness that managed their infrastructure failed. The hive mind's greatest strength became their greatest weakness as their shared mental network turned into a pathway for human psychological attacks. The reptilian hegemony's military might proved useless against human tactical superiority. Admiral Stone personally led the assault on their core systems, using battle plans that had been refined over 3 years of careful analysis. The humans had studied every hegemony battle formation, every strategic doctrine, every weapon system. They knew their enemies better than the enemies knew themselves. The hegemony's proud warrior culture became a liability. Their commanders were predictable, following ancient tactical traditions that the humans had memorized. Their honor code prevented them from using certain strategies that might have been effective against a more conventional enemy. The humans showed no such restraint. The Battle of Serpentine lasted 3 days and ended with the complete destruction of the hegemony's home fleet. The humans didn't just defeat their enemies. They humiliated them. Hegemony vessels were disabled rather than destroyed, their crews captured and forced to watch as their military tradition was systematically dismantled. The reptilian warriors who had prided themselves on their combat prowess were outmatched by humans who had turned warfare into a precise science, but it was the assault on the ethereal council that demonstrated the true extent of human evolution. The council existed primarily in pocket dimensions, spaces between normal reality where they could manipulate energy and matter at will. They had considered themselves untouchable, beings of pure energy who could retreat to higher dimensions. If threatened, the humans had spent 3 years learning to follow them. Dr. Smith, a former quantum physicist who had become humanity's leading expert on dimensional manipulation, led the assault on the Council's sanctuary. She had developed weapons that could breach the barriers between dimensions, forcing the energy beings into normal space-time where they became vulnerable. The battle was fought across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The humans used technology that shouldn't have been possible, creating paradoxes and impossibilities that forced the council members to abandon their energy forms and take physical shape. Once corporeal, they could be captured, imprisoned, and judged for their crimes. The last member of the council, the architect who had designed the barrier around Earth, was captured while trying to escape to a dimension beyond normal space-time. The humans dragged him back to reality and broadcast his trial across the galaxy. His execution was watched by billions of beings, a message that even the most powerful civilizations could not escape the consequences of their actions. Captain Reed had been assigned to coordinate civilian evacuations from the war zones. He commanded a small fleet of converted merchant vessels, working desperately to save innocent lives from the destruction that followed the human fleets. The humans were precise in their targeting, focusing on military and government facilities while avoiding civilian casualties when possible. But the scale of the destruction made collateral damage inevitable. The refugees Reed rescued told stories of human efficiency that chilled him. The humans weren't acting out of rage or hatred. They were conducting a systematic elimination of the species that had betrayed them, following detailed plans that had been prepared during their imprisonment. Every target was chosen for maximum strategic impact. Every attack was calculated to send a message to the galaxy. The war's turning point came when the human fleet arrived at the Ethereal Council's primary dimensional nexus. The nexus was a point where multiple realities intersected, allowing the Council to influence events across the entire galaxy. Its destruction would cripple the Council's ability to manipulate space-time, but it would also cause unpredictable effects throughout the local galactic cluster. The humans destroyed it anyway. The explosion sent shockwaves through multiple dimensions, causing temporary distortions in space-time that were felt across thousands of light years. The message was clear. The humans were willing to risk destabilizing reality itself to achieve their goals. The war ended not with surrender, but with extinction. The 4 species that had conspired to destroy humanity were eliminated completely. Their homeworlds were left as dead monuments to betrayal. Their colonies were abandoned, their technology was destroyed, and their historical records were erased from galactic databases. The remaining civilizations watched in terror as the human fleets patrolled the empty systems, ensuring that no trace of the conspirators remained. The galaxy had learned what happened when species chose fear over understanding, and the lesson had been written in the complete destruction of 4 entire civilizations. The humans had won their war. But the cost had been their innocence. They had become exactly what they needed to become to survive, and the galaxy would never be the same. The silence that followed the war was different from the silence that had begun it. Where once there had been the absence of human voices, now there was the absence of 4 entire civilizations. The reptilian hegemony's battle songs would never again echo across the galaxy. The crystalline collective's harmonic frequencies had been reduced to static. The hive mind's collective consciousness had been shattered into individual fragments that could no longer find each other. And the ethereal council's ancient wisdom had been erased from the cosmic record. Admiral Stone stood in the observation deck of his flagship, looking out at the ruins of what had once been the hegemony's capital system. The planets were still there, but they were dead worlds now, their surfaces scarred by the weapons humanity had used to erase all trace of their former inhabitants. The sight should have filled him with satisfaction, but instead he felt only a cold emptiness that had been growing inside him since the war began. He had been a different person before the barrier appeared. A career military officer certainly, but one who believed in diplomacy and peaceful coexistence. The 3 years of imprisonment had changed him, as it had changed all of humanity. They had been forced to become something harder, colder, more ruthless than they had ever intended to be. The human fleet was withdrawing from the conquered systems, but not returning to Earth. The Sol system remained empty, its planets still bearing the scars of 3 years of stellar manipulation. The artificial climate systems that had kept humanity alive during their imprisonment had failed when the barrier collapsed, leaving their homeworld uninhabitable. Earth was silent now for a different reason. There was no one left to speak for it. Instead, humanity had established new colonies throughout the galaxy. These weren't the peaceful settlements that had characterized human expansion before the war. They were fortress worlds, heavily defended and strategically positioned to monitor the major trade routes and communication networks. Each colony was a reminder of human presence and power, a warning to any species that might consider following in the footsteps of the conspirators. The Galactic Senate had been reformed without its founding members. The surviving civilizations offered humanity membership, reparations, and formal apologies for the actions of the extinct species. The offers were politely declined. Humanity would remain outside the established order, watching from the shadows and ensuring that the galaxy never forgot the price of betrayal. Dr. Vale had been among the first to visit New Terra, humanity's new capital world. The planet was beautiful, with vast oceans and snow-capped mountains that reminded her of the Earth she had studied in her research. But the cities were different from the human settlements she remembered. They were functional, rather than elegant, designed for defense rather than comfort. The humans who lived there carried themselves with a wariness that hadn't existed before the war. She met with Admiral Stone in his office overlooking New Terra's primary spaceport. The man who had once been humanity's greatest military leader now served as their civilian administrator, overseeing the transition from wartime to whatever peace would look like in the new galactic order. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked him during their conversation. "The destruction of the 4 species?" Stone considered the question for a long moment before answering. "Regret suggests we had a choice. We were betrayed by species we trusted, imprisoned in our own solar system and marked for extinction. We survived because we became what we needed to become. The galaxy is safer now because other species understand the consequences of such betrayal. The human colonies were largely self-sufficient, trading with neutral species but maintaining their independence from the galactic economy. They had learned during their imprisonment that relying on others for essential resources was a vulnerability they could not afford. Their technology had advanced beyond anything the galaxy had seen before, but they shared none of it with other species. Captain Reed had been offered command of one of the new human colonies, but he had chosen to remain with his merchant fleet. The galaxy still needed people who could move between different civilizations, facilitating trade and communication. The humans trusted him because he had been stranded outside the Sol system when the barrier appeared, making him one of the few humans who had witnessed the conspiracy from the outside. His ship now carried a different cargo than rare minerals and manufactured goods. He transported refugees from the war zones, helped resettle survivors from the destroyed civilizations, and carried messages between the human colonies and the galactic community. It was difficult work, requiring him to navigate between species that feared humanity and humans who trusted no one. The younger generation of humans, those who had grown up during the imprisonment, were different from their parents. They had no memory of the time when humanity had been part of the galactic community, when cooperation and trust had been possible. They had been raised on stories of betrayal and survival, taught to be suspicious of alien intentions and prepared for conflict. The children born after the war were different still. They were citizens of New Terra and the other human colonies, worlds that had never known the optimism of early human expansion. They were educated in military academies alongside civilian schools, learning both the arts of peace and the science of war. They were humanity's future, and they were being prepared for a galaxy that their parents had learned could not be trusted. The neutral species that had survived the war tried to rebuild the galactic community, but the task was nearly impossible. The four most powerful civilizations had been eliminated, leaving a power vacuum that no one was strong enough to fill. Trade routes were disrupted, communication networks were severed, and the carefully maintained balance of galactic politics had been destroyed. Some civilizations thrived in the new environment. Species that had been overshadowed by the great powers found opportunities to expand their influence. Others struggled to adapt to a galaxy without the familiar structures that had defined interstellar relations for millennia. The humans watched it all from their fortress worlds, intervening only when conflicts threatened to spill over into their territories. The final message from Admiral Stone was broadcast on the anniversary of the war's end. He spoke from the bridge of his flagship, now converted into a memorial to the humans who had died during the imprisonment. Behind him, displays showed images of Earth before the barrier, of the human colonies that had flourished before the betrayal, and of the species that had once been trusted allies. "We did not choose this path," Stone said, his voice carrying across the galaxy on every frequency. "We did not choose to become the Watchers, the Guardians, the species that others fear. But we will not allow the galaxy to forget what happens when civilizations choose extinction over coexistence. The four species that betrayed us are gone. Their homeworlds stand empty as monuments to the price of treachery." He paused, looking directly into the camera as if addressing each listener personally. "We remember every betrayal. We remember every alliance that was broken, every trust that was violated, every attempt to destroy us. We have become what we needed to become to survive, and we will remain vigilant to ensure that no other species suffers the fate that was intended for us." The broadcast ended with a simple statement that would be remembered by future generations. "We are humanity. We endure. We protect our own, and we never forget." The years that followed were marked by an uneasy peace. The galaxy learned to function without the four extinct species, but the lessons of the war were never far from anyone's mind. New alliances were formed carefully, with detailed treaties and monitoring systems designed to prevent the kind of conspiracy that had nearly destroyed humanity. Trade agreements included provisions for transparency and mutual oversight. Diplomatic relations were conducted with a formality that had not existed before the war. The human colonies continued to grow, but always within carefully controlled parameters. They accepted refugees from other species, but only after extensive screening and integration programs. They participated in galactic commerce, but maintained their technological superiority and strategic independence. They were part of the galaxy, but apart from it, trusted by some and feared by all. Captain Reed aged into a respected elder statesman, one of the few beings who could speak to both humans and aliens with equal authority. His merchant fleet became a symbol of the limited cooperation that was possible in the new galactic order. He carried stories between the worlds, helping to maintain the fragile connections that prevented the galaxy from fragmenting completely. The monitoring stations that had once watched for signs of human activity now tracked different threats. The galaxy had learned that technological advancement could be dangerous when combined with paranoia and isolation. New protocols were established to identify civilizations that might be developing weapons of mass destruction or showing signs of aggressive expansion. The Ethereal Council's dimensional nexus had been rebuilt by a coalition of neutral species, but it operated under strict limitations. No single civilization could control it, and its use was monitored by multiple oversight committees. The new operators were careful to avoid the kind of manipulation that had led to the conspiracy against humanity. Dr. Vale continued her research, now focused on preventing future conflicts rather than analyzing past ones. She established institutes on multiple worlds dedicated to understanding the psychology of interstellar relations. Her work became required reading for diplomats and military officers throughout the galaxy. The title of her most famous publication would become a warning for future generations. The Price of Fear: How Paranoia Destroys Civilizations. The galaxy had entered a new age, one marked by caution rather than optimism, by vigilance rather than trust. The silence that had once marked Earth's absence now marked humanity's presence. They were watching, waiting, and ensuring that the galaxy never forgot the consequences of betrayal. The human colonies were beacons of strength in the darkness, reminders that some species could not be conquered, could not be contained, and could not be destroyed. They had survived the ultimate betrayal and emerged stronger, harder, and more determined than ever before. The war was over, but humanity's vigil had just begun. They would watch over the galaxy not as conquerors but as guardians, ensuring that the mistakes of the past would never be repeated. The species that had once tried to destroy them were gone, but their legacy lived on in the lesson they had taught, that some prices are too high to pay, and some enemies are too dangerous to create. In the end, Earth remained silent, its voice replaced by the watchful presence of its children scattered across the stars. The galaxy had learned to live with that silence, to respect it, and to remember what it represented. Humanity had paid the ultimate price for their survival, but they had ensured that no other species would ever have to pay it again. The new order was built on the foundation of that promise, and it would endure as long as humanity remained vigilant, as long as they remembered, and as long as they never forgot that some betrayals could never be forgiven.